glad you're here today because today I want to chat about painting in gouache. So I've been doing some gouache paintings lately and I'm really just trying to find my way with it. So I thought for today I'd just slow things down a bit and show you how I finish up this painting while we chat about what I've learned. First, if you're not familiar with this paint, it's pretty interesting. Some say it's like if watercolor and acrylics had a baby. And I think that's because it's water soluble and it comes in a tube, and like acrylic, you can get it really opaque. But like watercolor, you can also water it down, and once it's dry, it is reactivatable. You can move it around. So given all those qualities, you can imagine why so many people are using it, but in practice, I really find it kind of strange. Watered down, it really doesn't look all that nice, and because of the reactivation factor, I think it's really easy for the colors to get really muddy if you're not careful. So after a few paintings, here's what I've learned, and here's what I've adopted as kind of my gouache painting method and approach. So the first thing that I do is limit my palette. This helps in a couple of ways. One, a limited palette just makes painting anything easier. You've got less choices to make, but in this case, it also helps you keep your colors in order so you can avoid that muddiness trap that I talked about. I like to pick about 4 colors, either straight out of the tube or pre-mixed, it doesn't matter. But just making sure that I have a nice range of tones, so a very dark, a couple of mid-tones, and a lightest light, usually white. And so for this painting, you can see I've chosen a dark blue, a yellow ochre, a light rose color, and a white. Next thing that I'm going to do is create a color map with a really watered down version of my 4 colors. So what this looks like is a very light painting over my sketch. And to be honest, this is not a pretty phase of the painting. It does not look great, but it does help you to know where all the colors are going to go before going in with the thicker paint, because that's where the muddiness happens, and not knowing where those colors are going to go and that paint is really going to be put down, you have to move it, and if you move it, you are looking at mud. Okay, so once I have a good idea of where my colors are going to go and the surface is dry, remember this is water soluble paint, so I want to paint always on a dry surface, I'm going to go in with a heavier application and I'm going to block in the areas that I've set out in just a more opaque version. This is probably a good time to mention another weird quality that this paint has, which is that it dries darker. Yeah, so the color you put down is not the color you end up with, and I kind of learned to like this a bit because it sets me up for the last step in my painting, which is what you're seeing me do here, and that's painting the highlights, transitions, and line work. So once you have your colors all blocked in, and you have a chance to take a look at the lightest light areas, which are now probably a little bit darker than what you intended. Now you can go in and add another dimension of color on top. So to avoid the muddiness, I do tend to add just a version of the same color on top of what I have. So either a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, and in the case of highlights, obviously a little bit lighter. And then the transitions, these are probably my favorite part. So I like to find areas where the lights and darks meet and see if there's an opportunity to add another transitional value in there just to help depict the form, or just add that bit of sharpness to the painting, especially if it's in a focal point area. Lastly, and this is really a personal thing, guys, I like to go in and really shore up my drawing. I think this has been the biggest aha moment for me in painting with gouache, and that is that in my hands it really feels more like a drawing medium than a painting. So let me explain what I mean. So I have this association in my head with drawing being about line and painting being about mass, and logically, I know this is a totally arbitrary distinction that probably I learned somewhere in school, but that's where I'm coming from. So when I look at my gouache painting and how I naturally want to add in line work, now it feels like an illustration or a drawing to me versus what I would think of as like a traditional painting, like how I might naturally handle an oil painting, for instance. The only reason that I mention this is because early on in my practice with gouache, I was really frustrated. The techniques that I learned with oil painting, like tonal underpaintings and massing in loose color and open color palette mixing and blending and things like that, not only did those techniques not really translate, but they just resulted in what I would consider a horrible mess. When I would use drawing or more graphic illustration techniques of color mapping and allowing myself to use line work, then the result would be so much more satisfying, even if it wasn't what I thought it was supposed to be in terms of a painting. Once I accepted this approach, it made using the medium so much more enjoyable and just much more clear when this medium was appropriate versus another. So now I can kind of, to a degree, predict what I will be able to achieve with gouache versus, say, a watercolor painting or an oil painting. All of them valid media, but will produce totally different visualizations, at least in my hands. And so in the end, I think I can get into doing some more gouache paintings. I do like it. Hopefully I'll evolve this technique over time and see where I can take it. It definitely won't replace anything that I do or any other media that I use, but I do think I'll try and do a little bit more with it. Alright guys, so that's it for today. If you've tried gouache, I'd love to hear about it, and if you're thinking about trying it, let us know in the comments. Other than that, thanks for being here, for supporting the channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, I'll see you soon.